Welcome back to Wealthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wealthy Living. It's here that I have insightful and curious conversations to inspire you to live a meaningful, connected, and well life, both personally and professionally. So, we're living in the age of information and opinion overload. And yet, with all that noise, it's never been harder to know what's true. Discernment is about seeing through the noise in our relationships, in our choices, and even in the stories that we tell ourselves. It's the art of seeing clearly when everything around us feels loud and persuasive or emotionally charged. So discernment isn't about judgment. It's about developing our inner radar for what's true, for what's safe, and for what's aligned. It touches every part of our life, our health, our well-being, our connections, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. And to discern well, we have to practice. And sometimes that means slowing down and pausing and reflecting before we react. And that's one of the reasons I've created a discernment series, which is a collection of reflective guides to help you explore this practice in real situations. Now, for more information on this, you can find a link in the show notes to join a mailing list to get more information as these guides are released. But today's conversation is with Nathalie Martinek, and she's someone who really embodies discernment and guides others through it, specifically with her Substack, Hacking Narcissism, where she explores truth, identity, integrity, and human dynamics with incredible depth and courage. Nathalie is a systems researcher turned workplace relational strategist and a creator of frameworks for relational clarity. And every single time Nathalie and I talk, which is quite often, we end up wishing we'd hit record. So today we are, and we're unpacking what discernment really looks like in the modern world, how we recognise it, how we override it, and what it costs us and gives us when we finally trust it. So welcome, Nathalie.
Thanks, Lisa. It's good to be back with you to talk about some saucy topics.
Yes, so good. I love our conversations. So you and I, we're often exploring human dynamics. We've done so for years. But this word discernment so regularly comes up in so many topics that we discuss. And you've written a brilliant Substack article on it, which I will link in the show notes for anybody who wants to read it. And you should definitely do that along with all of Nathalie's other Substacks. But I want to start there. So how do you define discernment?
Discernment is the ability to perceive the truth or what's true, even when it's inconvenient. And it's your ability to see the truth beyond your conditioning and the pressure to conform and deny reality. So it's the ability to perceive the truth regardless of what's going on in your circumstances and environment and the different pressures and tensions that you're experiencing.
Okay, so can you take us to a moment when you realised that your, say, inner radar or your discernment was telling you something?
Yeah, so I mean, there's different types of discernments, I guess, discerning what is factual, what is true information or true evidence versus, fake, fake evidence, or what a person is telling you, whether or not they're speaking truthfully, or expressing their ideal self-view or self-image that they're trying to convince you to believe in, because that's what they believe about themselves. So seeing that congruence between what they say and what they do. So always back to people. So I talk about discernment in relation to our interactions with others. So someone who was trying to, I don't know, work with me and convince me that we'd be a good fit because we have um, similar interests and some complementary expertise. And but I wasn't I wasn't convinced based on just that. And I had to ask, well, is it a good fit for me or is it a good fit for them? Are they going to benefit more from the collaboration with me than I will with them? So those are sort of the questions in my mind because something didn't feel quite right. So I had to challenge that a little bit.
Mm. So when you say something didn't feel right, what did it feel like in your body before you had the language for it?
I guess I feel tension in my stomach, in my like abdominal area, not the actual physical stomach, um, and in my jaw. So it's like my jaw gets a bit stiff, and I'm not always aware of it. But in this situation that I'm thinking about right now, that's what was going on. Just like a stiffness in my body. That's like this something is off
Mm,
with this person because it's yeah, I'm not buying into what they're trying to sell to me.
mm,
And I think the stiffness in my stomach is like
mm,
feeling pressured by someone who's, I guess, trying to take the lead in the interaction or the lead in the relationship to convince me of uh, that this is the right thing to do because they really want it. So I think these are all the things that I'm feeling, that pressure, the tension, and their desire to make this fantasy of theirs happen.
mm. Yeah, and it's not always so easy, even when we feel those things. A lot of people, due to their internal patterns or emotional obstacles, they just find it really hard to trust their inner or own discernment. So that, they might feel those things but ignore them. What are some of those patterns or obstacles that make it so hard for people to trust their own discernment?
Well, I think when you have these feelings, you don't know what they actually mean at the time, or you just, there's so much going on, you're not really tuning into what's happening in your physical body and the messages trying to tell you. And this has been cultivated for me through many years. Now that I know I feel this tension in my, abdominal area and in my jaw, I automatically know something's not right here. But
Mm,
that is the pattern I've come to recognize. Not everyone would have established that knowledge of themselves unless they've been screwed over enough times to that's the other thing about discernment. It comes about because you've been betrayed and duped enough times that you've had enough and you don't want it to happen again. That
mm,
shift in your thinking of what you're going to do. So instead of jumping into something that sounds good, because someone's presenting a compelling case for you to convince you to believe them and to take it on, you start to slow down and go, wait a minute, I need to think about this. And in that slowing down, then you might become aware of things happening in your body, but that takes practice.
mm,
Not automatic. So people might feel these things, they just can't interpret them and apply them to the situation in that moment because there's too much going on.
mm. Yeah, and in the fast life that we live, it's often that we're not slowing down enough in order to really tune in to what our body is telling us. And a lot of people I find, and even myself, many a times you can play tricks with your mind and convince yourself that it's that it's not off or that I'm imagining it.
Yeah, we're very good at going into denial and deceiving ourselves. And why do we do it? That's the other thing. So what I talk a lot about in relation to discernment are authority. So who
Mm,
has the authority? Who is assuming the position of authority in an interaction? Whereas each of us have our own authority. And I don't mean that authority is that you're in charge of other people and you control other people and their decisions. No, but there's somebody in any interaction, we we are playing status games, and a status game means that someone is going to want to be in control and dominate and control narratives, control a vision, And so they become the dominant person in this hierarchy that's playing out between us. So they assume position of authority. And when we want to believe the thing that they're trying to sell us, because they're convinced it's the right thing, and we want to tap into that because we want to see it too, because it sounds really good, we are now deferring to their authority, not our own. So we have a tendency to do that. We just, align with the authority and ignore our own authority, or we don't even think about our own authority in that moment. What they're saying sounds really good, and it appeals to me, and it matches, it aligns with my own desires. So sure, I'll go for what they're telling me. It must be true because I want it to.
Mm,
So our desire for things, our own fantasies can get in the way of our ability to pause and check, wait a minute, who is this actually going to benefit? And
mm,
just because someone believes strongly in what they're saying doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean they have the capacity to execute or to, manifest the things that they believe, or they're
mm,
telling you that they're going to be able to do. They believe in it strongly, but that's not the same thing as being able to do it. But
mm,
we don't see that in the moment. We tap into the fantasy and align with the authority figure who is the more powerful person who can give us, we think, the thing that we want.
mm. Yeah, we do. It's so common, whether it's in personal or professional relationships, where we outsource the power.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
we commonly do that. Um, and of course, there's lots of explanations for it developmentally. We're looking to please a parental figure, want their validation and acceptance and approval. And so we tap into that in those moments that, kind of primitive or immature needs versus, wait a minute, they're wanting something from me because I've got something. I've developed something through my own labor and efforts that is important and valuable to them. But they're trying to make themselves seem as the more valuable person or thing that I should want. So
Mm,
you can call that manipulation. Not always manipulation, because again, a lot of people don't know this is just their normal way of relating. They don't know that what they're doing is kind of manipulative, but it's only manipulative if you buy into it. It's not manipulative if you don't.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So you write about, when you sort of talk about the struggle of with discernment, you write about something called anticipatory guilt, that
Mm.
we feel guilty before we even question something. Why
Yeah.
do we do that? And can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So as a term, I mean, it's not my term, but just putting two words together, the guilt we tend to feel when we let people down. And it's the anticipation of letting somebody down while dealing with the pressure to have to please them or appease them. So I'm already feeling guilty about not complying or not going along with what that person, with that authority figure wants from me. So that creates my own mechanism of denial, deception, and doubting myself, and the things that aren't going to help me, because I'd rather feel crappy about myself than
Mm,
let that person down, let that authority down, because I've come to believe that what they have to offer will be good for me. It might elevate me, gives me power, and I'd rather shut myself down than let that person down. So it's even before I've given my decision not to work with them, I'm already feeling
mm.
guilty.
And in personal relationships, that works the same way.
Yeah, personal, any sort of relationships. Yeah.
So that kind of like takes us to sort of that emotional and cultural sort of question. So you talk a lot about like the current culture. So information overload and social media performance, the collapse of traditional authority, and all of those things making it harder to discern and to not just people please, and not really listen to our inner radar and inner authority. Like all of this current culture that we live in makes it a lot harder. And like you mentioned, also, however our upbringing has been as well. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so what is it about our culture? I mean, we're overloaded with information. A lot of it is now AI generated. Um,
Yeah.
so it's fabricated truth,
Yeah.
media. So the crux of all of this is the ability to trust what you're
Mm,
seeing in your reality, in your worlds, trusting others, trusting the various authorities that you once believed were trustworthy, institutions relate, just anything, any relationship we have with anyone, it requires trust for us to receive the benefit from that relationship. So the constant betrayal of trust through the lies, the fabricated information, misinformation, disinformation, people becoming more I don't know, political. Um, Maybe not everyone, but this is what you see in social media because algorithms like to promote outrage and scandalous sort of, controversial ideas. So if this is what you're exposed to all the time, your trust in and faith in others start to erode and you become dehumanized when that happens. So you start to easily judge people and label people, put them in different categories of untrustworthy or unsafe. So this is kind of what happens in this world. You become less trusting of the world around you and the people in your life or the people and the authorities around you. So it affects your ability to discern what is truth because you have to work out, well, what's a trustworthy source? And I have to trust myself in order to be discerning. Leverage my inner authority. I need to trust it. So trust and discernment go hand in hand. And we have to work harder because we are bombarded with so much fake information and fake versions of reality that you have to keep checking. Is what I'm seeing real? Am I the crazy one? Am I the sane one? And this is the sort of thing that I'm seeing in people's dialogues online as well, that it's gotten harder and harder to say what you think is true because you're going to be attacked by those who don't want to admit that, who don't want to
yeah.
see, who have
Because
a dominant narrative
yeah,
about.
because our culture rewards conformity. It rewards algorithms. It rewards performance, and rather than necessarily truth. And like you said, when you stand up, and I do see voices online that try to speak the truth or speak their truth that might go against a mainstream narrative, and they get a whole lot of backlash.
Yeah.
And then that, yeah, sure, if they're really strong, they don't let that impact them and they keep standing up for their truth. But for most people, the emotional toll of that sort of pushes down their ability to have a voice, to speak their truth.
Yeah.
And then that can filter, I'm sure, into not just this online area of speaking, but you sort of feel shut down in sometimes in your actual personal relationships or in your professional relationships, even in person.
Yeah. Yeah, we could think of a number of things where truth has been eroded, like genders, men and women, that know that these are just constructs, they're not real now. So now we have to live and navigate a world where we can't even define what a woman is or a man
Yeah.
is. Um, or a friend, someone I know the other day on his, platform, was talking about whether the whole thing around Helen Keller was real because it seems so far-fetched that augmentative technology back then led to someone who was deafblind from, 18 months onward before they necessarily developed all the capacities for certain literacies, somehow was able to write all these books. And so the controversial idea is that it was her assistant who actually wrote all these things. But he got so much flack for even stating that it's a possibility that all that stuff was fake, because of what it means, the implications of challenging that our, deafblind hero was actually a fake. And therefore, our ideas about, people with disabilities, are now diminished. So there's two, so But he's somebody who likes to challenge these ideas because, well, we should. We should
Yeah.
challenge
But,
ideas.
but
But
the,
it's like it's like, how dare you state this thing? These things are off limits, but they shouldn't be off limits because we're allowed to be discerning. We're allowed to call bullshit on things that don't even make sense given what we know now. So doesn't mean it's true. It just means that we're having a conversation to challenge and dissect and explore this notion that
yeah.
essentially Helen Keller was not all she was cracked up to be.
And a key point that you just said then is that we can challenge things, but it doesn't mean that it's true. And I think that that's where there's this line at the moment online where people who have a very, say, strong opinion about the way that something went down, even the circumstance that comes to mind for me is the Charlie Kirk narrative. And there is multiple opinions on very polarizing, um, it's very polarized in the opinions, and each one who has a really strong opinion presents it as if it's 100% true. And the real truth is in most of these situations, nobody really knows the absolute truth unless you're on the inside. And
Mm.
that's a political one, but even the Helen Keller one or lots of different things, unless you're actually there going through it and you had a whole lot of intel that is true, it's just that a exploration, a curiosity, a challenge of this is what it feels like for me. This is what my brain, in my critical thinking of pulling this, this, and this, is starting to question or explore. And I think that we really do need more of that exploration, more of that curiosity, more of that ability to have conversations that where you don't necessarily agree with the other person, but you can still hold respect for each opinion.
Yeah, yeah. That's the point. Isn't that what diversity is? Diversity of perspectives, diversity of opinions, that we can still relate to each other and have common ground without needing to agree
Yeah.
with others' perspectives. But it does require desire to seek to understand the other's perspectives, both parties being involved in that rather than and to appreciate where they're coming from, even if it's just not how you see things. That's okay. But yeah, it's too many people are afraid of even naming things or allowing certain ideas to air because it challenges their, their concepts or their belief systems or ideologies. And instead of questioning their belief, they shut down the contradictions. And that's just not the way we need to live because it creates, the silencing and the things that we're seeing, that you're not allowed to say things, you get canceled or harassed if you speak a certain opinion. Even today, we're in 2025. It's wild. But humans are human, and lots of people have fragile egos and can't handle, bruises to their perception. And they don't necessarily have the capacity to examine themselves. And we could talk a lot about, how did this arise? How did we get to such a coddled culture where you can't even say things because they're going to get uncomfortable and feel upset with you, and so you have to walk on eggshells, and it creates this power dynamic where these, these learned helpless people dominate how things go, and that's not a way to live.
Yes, I agree. Um, so extending on that then, like if we look at the cost and the gift of discernment, because we've come to this place, and yes, like you said, we could explore how, but that would probably be take us into a 2 hour episode. So so if we just stick to if we don't go there, but we just look at like discernment and what it does cost us, like with belonging and reputation and ease. But, at the same time, it can also bring freedom and peace. And so you've got this balance, and some people are going to feel a lot of freedom and peace, and others are going to feel this cost of reputation and belonging. So, how does someone stay grounded when, say, discernment isolates them?
You could view it as isolating. Hopefully you're not alone, that you have people in your life who, you can relate to and they can relate to you and not isolate you because of, the things that you've chosen to do or not do because you recognize your authority in this decision making and what is true to you. Um, I think it's important to talk about what discernment is not. So,
Mm.
you when it during the I guess the elections in the US, you hear about so many people who go no contact with their parents or their relatives or loved ones because they're pro or against Trump or whatever. It's usually more left-leaning who are the ones who are doing the no contact because they disagreed with the political stance of their parent or their sibling or their good friend. That's not discernment. That's just being an asshole.
Yes, that's just judgment. Yeah.
Yes, that's just being judgmental and, I need to protect myself from, it's this childish, you're not being abused. There's valid reasons for going no contact with a parent. Abuse is usually ongoing abuse is probably part of that, but having disagreements on political views is, in my mind, not just justification for, getting rid of the people who raised you and looked after you and gave you the privilege to act like a entitled brat. Uh,
But it does
my
happen
humble,
a lot with friendships as well. So whether it's for a political reason, and it's often lately been around a lot of political reasons, whether it be election, whether it be war, whether it be, all of these different things where um, people do end up feeling isolated because people cannot continue interacting with people who do not align with their values. And it is hard because at the same time, being discerning might be reflecting about your own values and also reflecting on whether if this person has such different values around a certain thing and it holds a really dear place for say the other person, how do you then keep the connection and feel differently?
yeah. Um, it's hard when you discover something about the other person that you realize exposes the diametric difference in your value system. But again, is it leading them to act out in a certain way that is incongruent with the values, or is it just the belief that makes you think that you have different, you no longer have these shared values or have different principles? So,
That's a
um,
good point.
so I think about, so many people, I see so much writing of why I left the left, Americans who are strong left-leaning people, strong liberals or Democrats, and they started to see the behavior of many among this community and recognized these are not my people. This is not how I want to be. I don't actually believe this stuff because this other thing has happened that has caused me to question my
Mm.
belief and values. And I've recognized that the belief no longer fits with the values that I have. And I believe I don't need to be part of this group. So that's discernment. So you decide I no longer want to be Democrat, liberal, whatever, aligned with this faction or cult. So you have to leave it. So you have friends there. And because you've recognized you no longer share certain values, you're less inclined to want to spend time with them because you're seeing more and more of the difference. You're seeing a little bit more of the crazy potentially of their behavior, or the immaturity around their reactions to certain things. So you start to distance yourself. So that in itself can become isolating, but you're going to something else because you're
Yeah,
seeing reasonable people. So you're aligning more with the people that you now realize express the values in the way that align with you or congruent with your principles. So it can be isolating, especially if those friends that you're leaving behind notice that you're not spending as much time with them, that you're distancing yourself. So they start to make you feel guilty, they shame you, and all the things that happen when you leave any sort of group, because of the implications for them. They start to feel rejected. What's wrong with us? But they never voice it. They make you the problem. So in that experience, it can feel quite isolating. But you're discerning what is more correct for you now, given your growth, your development, the things you've come to learn and understand, the questioning process that you've gone through to air out your doubts and examine your values and all the things. You went through a process. That allowed you to arrive at this new place of knowing, which is different to where you started. So it will require this coming out of a group think or a cult type of mentality. But the mistake is people go from one to the next.
That's what I was just about to
Yeah.
call out.
So they're not being discerning about what's driving them to the next thing
Yes,
because it's like, I just need my people. I don't want to feel alone versus I'm going to withdraw myself and be politically homeless for a while because I don't, the things I'm seeing there could easily be seen in the other side. And
totally.
so I need to just like not align myself with anyone because I need to figure out who the hell I am and what my identity is now in the absence of those relations and that identity that I had before.
Yeah.
So that's better, I think, a more efficient discernment process because you're less likely to repeat the same pattern of ending up conforming, immersing,
Yeah.
um, becoming, assimilating. You're
Yes.
becoming your individual,
I'm
you're
I'm
different.
so glad that you went there because as you were talking, I was thinking exactly that. So what happens if you sort of move away from that because it doesn't align anymore and your inner radar is going, no, 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 no. And then you leave one place because it doesn't align. You feel this deep connection with these other people who feel aligned, and then you fall into possibly, especially because so much is online now, and we see things through algorithms and what we have looked at, that we fall into this other echo chamber that then feels really good for a while because we are getting affirmed consistently to our beliefs or the way that we feel. And they're like, oh yes, I've made the right decision, this is exactly how I feel, the other is just off. And so you've gone from that off feeling and then you make a choice and you change directions, but then and it feels good for a while, and then you start to realize, oh, I'm only seeing this now. Is this the truth? And so it's, especially in the online world, it can be so difficult now in today's modern society to discern, effectively.
Mm. I mean, it's part of a process. So you go from one camp to another camp to another camp, and eventually you realize I can't keep doing this because I keep encountering the same thing, and I'm the common denominator here. So I have to stop jumping and trying to belong. So the more you differentiate. So differentiation is again becoming you're not needing an authority to endorse you or to protect you. You are an in a group setting or like a tribe. The more you recognize that the tribe is often the problem, the need to be part of a tribe and the belonging aspect is a problem.
Mm,
More as you differentiate and become, more assured of your own authority. And again, it's not arrogance. It's you're able to discern what is truth, what is not, what aligns with you, what isn't, and how you can express your values in a more congruent way. As you develop that ability, that discernment, you your desire to belong reduces dramatically. I don't need to be part of a group. I don't need someone to endorse me or accept me or approve of me. I don't need my tribe. I have people that I relate to well. I don't need to be part of this central community. Um, so that's what I found for me. The more I've kind of developed it, and it's not like, screw the world, I'm better off on my own because everyone hurts me. No, I just don't like group settings. I don't because there's always a pressure to assimilate every single
mm,
group, no matter where you are. There's always that pressure because there's norms, there's unspoken rules and expectations, and unless I've co-contributed to that, I don't really want to be part of it. So I'm just going to do my own thing and have my small collectives of people, but I don't need that to belong. So after enough of these experiences where you're jumping from one place to another and you realize none of these are actually I don't eventually I feel like I don't belong anywhere, but I've been trying to compensate for this void I feel. Um, so the more I kind of
Mm.
work that out in myself and become okay with the fact that I'm free to just go wherever I want, and I appreciate my freedom more than having to assimilate into a group, the less I feel like I need to belong. So
Yeah.
the belonging thing, I mean, that could be a whole other conversation, but
Yeah, I'll stop you there because I want to just contribute to that because it is a whole topic, that belonging thing, because as you speak, as you shared all of that, obviously it came back to that gift of discernment is that freedom and peace. So that's what you talked about. So not belonging, you kind of have, if you're happy with that, you kind of have this freedom and peace, but without making a whole nother episode on it, or which we might do, but now, just briefly talking about this concept of belonging, because I think that in some ways, whether we've been taught or whether we've been led to believe or conditioned, or whether it is truth, I don't know, but that belonging is a human need. And that as humans, we are supposed to be in village, in tribe, in belonging somewhere, and that actually is beneficial for our well-being. And when we feel like we don't belong, it can decrease our well-being.
yeah.
And I suppose perhaps there's a distinction in there as I talk between belonging and connection. And sometimes belonging and connection get interchanged, but maybe they're actually two very different things.
I would agree with that. I think they're two different things. You can have connection and never feel like you belong anywhere, but you're okay because you're stabilized by these, you know, connections and relationships you have that you can rely on versus constantly seeking groups. And in order to really belong, you have to assimilate. And some people are very good at that, but some people are built to not assimilate, like me. And no matter where I am, I didn't belong. So I had to work out a different way to go, well, I can't be an outcast my whole life. I need to figure out a way to just be okay with myself, regardless of who I'm with and what group I'm in, and not feel like I have to gain the approval of the group. So again, that comes with maturation, and a desire and the realization that having strong connections with people where there's deep, relational currency, where we could trust each other, we can challenge each other, we can repair, ruptures when either of us hurt each other. That's priceless. And you don't need many of those. You just need enough of those that help you feel stable, when you're going through the turbulence that life brings.
Mm.
So yeah, I think but in order to get to connection, you might have to do the belonging thing. I just think the belonging thing, like you said, is conflated with connection. And like you see workplaces, you can belong here. We want to create belonging. Like, I don't want to belong in my workplace. I just want to do my job. Like, I have other things in my life that
Mm.
satisfy my needs. I don't need it. And I recognize there's people who don't have that. And so they seek it out from their work. And I'm like, well, what happens when work betrays you? Then you're doubly screwed because you no longer belong and you've been betrayed. So you need to seek connections outside of this environment. So,
Mm. Because you
yeah.
do hear a lot about the workplace culture, changing, and that I do a bit of work in workplace culture space, and so do you. And it is this concept that keeps getting thrown around bring your whole self to work, bring the truth, speak your truth, don't let anybody let you not speak your truth. That is letting yourself down, and that means that you're not aligning with who you really are. And don't be bullied to shut your voice down and all of these concepts. And I kind of, we've had a few conversations about this in the past, so I kind of know what your take is on some of this, but I'd like you to share with the listeners um, a little bit about this idea and tied in with discernment.
Uh, yeah. So a lot of people want to believe the authority, the workplace, especially because they are providing your livelihood. You know, you work, you get your paycheck, you pay your bills, your mortgage, and all the things. So you want to emotionally invest in them, in it, and believe the best. But if you've had other experiences and you come into a workplace as the new, joiner, and you hear, we want you to speak your truth and be vulnerable and all that. If you have discernment because of your past experiences, you'd be like, hell no. Now, when I hear stuff like this, it means the opposite. Do not speak up. Do not say anything because they're going to, collect that data and use it against you.
Your jaw starts hurting, does it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So it's like, why do you want me to speak the truth? Why do you want, oh, because we want you to belong. We want you to feel at ease. There's no wrong opinions. There's no wrong perspectives. And I'm thinking, well, my previous workplaces where that's been said hasn't been true. So why should this one be different? So I would hold myself back as a discerning person. I'd think, okay, that's bullshit. I'm going to hold myself back and see if what they're saying is true or not. So I'm just going to suspend my belief, but I'm not going to do what they say. I'm going to check it out first. So that's a difference between someone who wants to have the blind faith and the someone who's had blind faith but learned that that was not the best thing and has developed their, discernment muscle to not believe what the
Mm.
institution is telling you.
Yeah. I mean, you sort of also write about, which sort of extends onto that in your article about when feeling special, that you should be treated, that it should be treated as suspicion.
Yes,
Maybe unpack that a little bit because I
yeah,
think that
it's not only,
extends.
yeah. So again, when you form connections with people based on their ability to make you feel important and special, but there's no requirement for you to have to do that with the other person, um, which is not a bad thing in itself. But if you are requiring it, then that sets you up for spectacular failure because because a lot of people who are doing that, they are wanting to get something from you, to get your loyalty, your allegiance, your resources, your knowledge, whatever it is they do. And I'm not saying everyone does this on purpose, like consciously. There's some who do it this consciously, and we call them, the dark triad leader, or dark tetrad. But a lot of people don't know they're doing this. It's just part of how they relate to people and form connections. And it makes it easier when you make the other person feel at ease and feel important and special, because they're more likely to give you what you want. So because of that, it sets you up for exploitation. It's not a great thing to need someone to make you feel special. It's nice if somebody makes you feel special, but if it's coming from your need to feel special, you're already vulnerable to getting exploited, and you can't have discernment there because you are requiring something from the other person. So you're unlikely to challenge them, unlikely to doubt them, or if you doubt them, you'll squash it down because you would rather live into you know, the addiction, I guess, of being made to feel important and special around them than to question why they're even doing it.
Yeah. And I'm imagine that gets played out with new employees in a workplace, with people, even when you move from one group to another and you're a newcomer, like I'm sure it gets played out in a lot of different circumstances where you are vulnerable to, I suppose, being treated like you're special, but, and then you lose that inner radar or that discernment.
You just shut it off if you probably you just didn't have it in the first place,
Mm.
I would suggest, because you bought into it instead of going, this is a job interview. I don't need you to make me feel special here. I don't, why are you doing this as if you've chosen me when I'm in the interview stage and there's other people that you're interviewing? So sometimes, whoever's recruiting and making decisions pick their favorites, and because they sense a signature in you that will make it easy for them to exploit you. Not, and again, that's often not what they're thinking in their mind, the non-dark triad, the randoms. Um, but in an interview, I've had so many clients tell me that they just made them feel so good, and it was like a sure thing, and they brought them on and they elevated them and introduced them to everyone and raved about them. And I'm like, but they barely know you. How can
Mm,
recruit you when they barely know anything about you? Why are they, that should be suspicious in self. Why are they so keen on celebrating you without having gotten to know you at all? And
mm,
and why are you okay with that? That would make me uncomfortable, because the humble part of me would think I need to earn that. I have to prove that somehow. Um, Not because of my past accolades or whatever category this person has put me in, that seems to make me this amazing person in their eyes. I They need some evidence. Why aren't they getting evidence? Why are they celebrating me? So that the scrutiny comes in because I'm being discerning. I
mm,
don't want, and because I don't need that specialness from somebody else. But those who don't, I recognize there's lots of people who do need that to feel good and confident. And they fall into these traps. And 100% of the time, my clients, when they've said to me, they were favored right away, they became the scapegoat. I'm like,
mm.
yes, because you have nowhere to go but down.
Yeah, and it is a tricky situation because the truth is that most people want to feel valued and outsource that value to other people for their own worth.
Yeah.
And even when we might be aware of how important it is for to feel your own value and nobody else's opinion should impact your value and your worth, and it should be an internal thing.
Yeah.
No matter how much we can intellectualize and know that, you're unique. You're solid. And you've obviously put in a lot of hard work to get to that place. But I think for most people, they don't have that real core stability. And so they do outsource a lot of that. And when you go to a place, everybody does like to feel loved and like they're doing a fabulous job and that everybody loves them and they're included and that they're going to have greater opportunities and greater possibilities and all of those feelings that feed our physiology, not just our it's not just a belief system or a self-worth system. It actually impacts our physiology, like it feeds endorphins and all of these dopamine. Then in a society where we're full of dopamine addicts, it's
Yeah, you do. We all need that. We all need to be celebrated from time to time. It's good when others see the value in us. We need that feedback from others. Um, but it's more meaningful to me from people I have connection with than some person who barely knows me.
mm,
It doesn't carry as much weight compared to the people who have come to know me, have seen evidence of whatever it is that they think is valuable, and feed that back to me. Not because they're trying to get something from me, but because they know it's something they feel they want to gift that to me, and because they
mm,
love me and admire me and all that stuff. And I would do the same. So it's who it's coming from. Again, discerning, is this coming from some random person who barely knows me? Um, it carries different weight than someone who I have a stronger connection with. Like, you know, there's, and this is murky ground as well, because, I write on Substack and on LinkedIn, and, people come across my work and they're going through a tough time in their life, and something they've read really resonates with them. And it just gives them a new insight or gives them relief, and they tell me about it. And so that means a lot to me, because it tells me what I've done has had an impact, a beneficial impact from the words they're telling me. That's meaningful to me, but it's not about me. It's about the words that I've put out and the fact they've encountered it. And those reinforcements are good for me because it tells me, okay, my work has value and people are encountering it. It's helping them. I'm going to keep going. So it gives me strength to keep going, but I'm going to do it anyway because I firmly believe in what I'm writing about, what I want to put out there. But those occasional, inputs help me. They just encourage me and give me, reminder that it's working, keep going.
Yeah, well, I think it's data in the end, isn't it? It's intel that's helping you or leading you into your further direction of your further writing. Yep, this one lands or this one doesn't land. And I suppose it gives you the motivation to go in a particular direction if it feels like you're landing with people and it's actually having this positive impact.
Yeah. So these are like the informal connections, I guess, versus the formal connections that I have with like you and other people. And so it's just nice to get that input from others, and it's nice to give that input to others.
Mm.
Um, and because we don't live in a bubble. But then it, if you rely on it to feel good about yourself, then it becomes an addiction. So you start doing things to gain that approval. And it's not a bad thing in itself, but it puts pressure on you and on the things that you're putting out there to have to deliver in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it just changes the intention a little bit. And so that's how people lose discernment if they've had it because they become addicted to the power or the status,
Or the
the
validation.
validation that they're given, and they're doing it for that versus doing it because they were internally motivated and their inner authority was saying this is what to do versus an external authority, anointing them with importance because of what it does for them.
Yeah. I mean, I do love that. I do love what you said before around how for you, how your people that are close to you that really know you, how they feel is more important than the feedback or how other people are viewing you that don't know you so well. And there's so much gold in that. And I think that so often we forget we forget that and the importance of that because we're in a world, especially with social media, where people are relying on so many people get their fuel and their energy from comments or positive comments or likes from strangers.
Like you've personally invested in me and I've personally invested in you. We've been friends for 10 years,
Yeah.
we've traveled with each other through good and bad times and everything in between. There's an investment in
Yeah.
this relationship. So it's going to matter to me more what you think and what you tell me than some person who barely knows me.
Yeah.
And so, but we can get so slighted by negative comments on our stuff by strangers and anonymous people. Like, why? They're nobody. They conjured an image, a perception of me, a negative one, and have, reacted to something I've said and responded in bad faith. Well, I don't care about them. That's on them. That's nothing to do with me. But we could take it personally, but who are they? So, it helps to have some perspective on, again, who are we choosing to get our feedback from and discerning what is truthful, what is bullshit, what do I take in, what do I reject? And it does take discipline to be able to do that, to know who are the right authorities to help you, guide your development and the decisions you make and the actions that you take. It gets harder and harder the more exposure you have to other people. It's easier if you don't live a life online and you're just surrounded by the people that you interact with face to face. But as you
We
become,
go back there to the 70s and
yeah,
80s. We go back there.
lots of people who just don't want a digital footprint and they stay offline, no social media, nothing. They have a very different sense of reality than those who do live online. And the people who do live online see that the world is getting worse. It's just, harder and harder. The world is crazy. I'm like, the world is always crazy. You're just getting more informed about it. And not all those sources are good sources and credible sources. But if we were living in the 50s, you relied on newspaper and media, and you didn't have access in real time to everyone's thoughts and feelings and farts. Like you just didn't. So bombarded with that. It was very, you had selective channels for getting that information. Now it's different. So does it mean that things are worse, or we're just finding out about things in real time and we're getting updates in every microsecond? I don't think that's good for us. I think we should just go back to the
Yeah.
60s in
Yeah,
that,
me too.
yeah, just not, or develop the psychological immunity to just block all that stuff out. Like you can see it, but it just doesn't penetrate.
Yeah. Such good reminders, Nat, such good reminders. And yeah, it's even, a great reminder for me just listening, even though, I've been exploring this topic and writing all these different reset, reflection guides. Um, yeah, but really great reminders. And you've really sort of given a lot of examples of using discernment in everyday connection. One of the guides that I've just recently written, haven't released it yet, is on the discernment of generous givers.
Mm.
Because if you're someone who naturally is generous, and generous to me, generosity is such a beautiful character trait, but generosity without discernment can impact us in not such a great way. And I know that I've been there in a number of ways, and I'm sure you have, and a lot of other people have. And whether it's in a personal or professional capacity, when we give and we give a lot and we don't have the boundaries, and then we give blindly and we're thinking that it's really good, that we're being a really good person in doing so, um, it can lead us to a path of resentment or feeling like the reciprocity is not there.
Mm.
And I suppose in this guide, what I sort of was, these guides that I've written are not about advice or what to or what not to do. They're not how to's or what to do's. They're just about stopping, resetting, and asking yourself 5 questions to determine whether, or to have the discernment of whether you do something or you don't do something. And so with this one about generous giving, it is about just stopping and coming back to realizing what are the reasons that you give and what are the reasons that you don't give, and should you, is it really truly aligned, and as opposed to just pleasing.
Yeah.
So with that topic, do you what what are you seeing on that topic? Is that a huge one, and is something that you've had to work through yourself?
Well, I'm not done with my discernment lessons. I'm going to get duped and screwed over, and, I'm still learning. Um, but having a decision-making tool is very helpful to stop and, slow down and stop and think about things before you make a decision, especially if you can be rash um, in some cases or with some people. So
Mm,
I think it's helpful. And then if you're a generous person and you're used to giving, and you come to recognize that somebody that you've been giving to does not reciprocate and you're tired of it, you can't just not do it anymore, because well, you can just not do it anymore. You're just going to have to deal with the backlash. But if
mm,
you're somebody who doesn't want to deal with the backlash, or have a different way that's maybe um, less dramatic, then you'd have to just discover a different strategy to implement in exchange for that level of generosity that the other person's used to doing.
mm.
So that also requires a bit of workshopping, so that unless you don't care and you're like, screw it, they're taking advantage of me, they're getting nothing from me anymore, and they're going to come at you because they're not going to understand what's changed, why it's happening. You can give them reasons. They might not understand, or they might understand, but either way, you've had to go through a process to get to that point and have the courage to actually execute it.
Yeah, which is, I suppose, brings us to something that I don't want to, we've sort of discussed a lot of it in different wording throughout the episode, but it brings us to that concept you talk about in your article, which is the process of discernment, the liberation cycle, where you describe discernment as this process of it starts with something feeling off and you call it disrupt. And then you dig a little bit deeper, and that's the extract, which I am assuming is that part where we just talked about, where we stop and we pause and we ask questions of ourselves. And then you talk about finally the letting go of what's no longer true, which is the release.
Yes.
And I think that we've talked a lot in this episode about the disrupt and about the extract, but that release, I think that sometimes how that actually looks is and what gets in the way of it, which we've talked a little bit about what gets in the way of it, is sometimes really hard. So maybe if we can quickly just touch on that release part.
Well, it's a little bit different with the way I've described it because disrupt is more of where discernment starts to kick in.
Yeah.
Extract is the result of your discernment. So it's the decision you've come to make as a result of you realizing this thing isn't right for me anymore. I need to take action, make a difference. So the sense making, the questioning, the challenging, examining is all the disrupt phase. And the extract is where you implement the strategy you've come up with, and which is part of your liberating from that crappy dynamic or that situation. And then once you've implemented that, and it's again just requires discernment on how you do that, then is the release. And it's a difficult part because even though you've gone through the difficulty of, coming to terms and having that reckoning of, what's not right for you anymore and how to, implement a strategy that will take you out of that situation. Now that situation won't want you to exit. It will try to keep you back there. So the release is this sort of tug of war between where you have been and where you're going. But where you're going is liberating because you're individuating or you're differentiating from the matrix or this authority figure who you assimilated to or assimilated you. So it's, a little bit different than the way you described it.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay, but that's, it's a cycle. You can have a cycle within the as well.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So just as a wrap up, if someone wanted to practice discernment this week, they wanted to get better at it, what's one small shift that they could make?
It's becoming a little cynical. Activating the inner cynic, or if you're feeling doubt, don't just give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Actually listen to the doubt because it's trying to tell you something. So maybe the little changes, get rid of, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to actually pay attention to my doubt because it's trying to tell me something.
Oh, that's a great one. I love that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So it's probably best to wrap it there because I think I haven't looked at the time, but it's probably at about the hour mark-ish.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for your insights as always.
Thanks for having me on and having this conversation.
Yes, we could probably do such a series, but we've had you on the podcast for a number of times, and all those conversations get a lot of listens and you give a lot of insights. And I took a pause on the podcast, and this is the first episode back in a long time. So it's been such a pleasure to be having this conversation with you.
Thank you. And I just love how you always bring them back to connection. It's about connection. Connection is medicine, that we're all trying to do that. And we're fumbling through the darker times and, how to not be distracted or connect with the wrong thing. So thank you for those reminders as well.
Oh, pleasure. So to follow Nathalie and to check out her incredible Substack called Hacking Narcissism, I will put the links in the show notes. And on your website, I'm sure you've got links to how to work with you as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'll put all of that in the show notes for anyone who wants to follow up with Nathalie. So there's something about talking with Nathalie that always leaves me reflecting long after we've stopped recording. And what stands out most for me in this conversation is that discernment isn't a one-time skill. It's a lifelong practice of paying attention. It's about catching ourselves in these subtle ways that we abandon our own knowing and gently finding a way back to ourselves. If this conversation stirred up something in you, or you just want to explore discernment more deeply, I really encourage you to check out my discernment series, which is a collection of reflective resets guides that pair really beautifully with this conversation. You can find out more about those in the link in the show notes. Just join the mailing list, and as they are released, I will let you know. So if you have loved this episode, please share it with someone who values thoughtful, curious conversations as much as you do. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Lisa, and this has been Wellthy Living Conversations. So stay in touch with me or find out more about my work. You can go to wellthyliving.com.au, or you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and the links will be in the show notes. So until next time, stay curious, trust your inner voice, and remember, connection is medicine.